There were 56 chairs set out for the funeral. 56. I counted them while everyone else cried. Karina had insisted on the silver-trimmed folding ones because they photographed better. But only 55 were filled. The one next to her, the one reserved for me, stayed empty. She told the usher not to seat me there. She said it would make things complicated. Complicated? Like mourning your father while secretly texting your attorney about divorce filings. Isn't already complicated. I stood at the back, not beside her, not with family, not even among the distant cousins. I stood next to a fuss tree and a woman who once dated her uncle in the 9 South. I held a funeral program that spelled my last name wrong. Nobody offered me a tissue. And when she stood to speak about her father, Glenn Darby, the oil titan, the man who once told me I smelled like drywall, she didn't mention me. Not once, not in the list of survivors, not in the thank yous, not even a sideways glance. She wore black silk and heels sharp enough to puncture egos. She cried perfectly enough to seem human, not enough to smudge mascara. And when she returned to her seat, she leaned in and whispered something to the man sitting where I should have been. He laughed. I don't know who he was. I don't care because what happened after the service? That's where the story actually begins. It wasn't the inheritance. Not yet. It was what Karina did on the way out. She dropped her handkerchief deliberately right in front of me. I bent to pick it up like an idiot, and that's when I saw it. The folded corner of a document in her clutch. I saw my name in bold next to a case number. And that's when I realized something brutal. She had filed the divorce before the funeral, before the flowers, before the eulogy, before she cried over a man who hated me and pretended she still loved me. And 2 days later, she would inherit $250 million. And 2 days after that, she would walk into our house, hand me a plain white envelope, and say, "Wendell, I'm choosing myself." But the will. Oh, the will had other plans. Plans that Karina didn't see coming. Plans that made her turn pale in a room full of mahogany furniture and legal threats. Plans that for the first time in years made me madder. I didn't sleep the night before the reading. Not a minute. I lay on the pull-out couch in my cousin's basement, listening to the pipes clank and hum, wondering if I should even show up. What would be the point? Karina had already taken everything, not just the marriage, but the dignity I once had standing beside her. When a woman leaves you before the flowers on her father's grave even wilt, you stop expecting fairness from the world. But that document, that single flash of bold text with my name on it, it nodded at me like a hangale you can't stop picking. Why would Glenn Darby, a man who used to refer to me as the lawn ornament, include me in anything? The estate was located on a private hill in Hampton Chase, surrounded by wrought iron gates and whispers. The kind of place where even the breeze smells expensive. I wasn't invited through the front like the others. I was directed to a side door, the one they usually reserved for caterers and service people, which was probably poetic in Glenn's eyes. A small group had gathered in the study. Deep leather chairs, animal heads on the wall, and a grandfather clock that had probably ticked through 3 world wars. Karina was already there, sitting with legs crossed, dressed in slate gray. No black this time. Mourning period complete. She looked at me, not with anger, not even with pity, just a vacant, transactional calm. Like I was someone she used to lease a car with. And next to her sat the same man from the funeral. I noticed his shoes, first polished loafers with little gold tags. No one wears shoes like that unless they expect to be stared at. I took a seat in the far corner where the light from the window didn't quite reach. Nobody greeted me. Not even the lawyer who shuffled and holding a thick manila envelope like it contained nuclear codes. He cleared his throat and began as the legal representative of the late Mr. Glenn Darby. I will now read his final instructions, witnessed, notarized, and recorded 2 months before his passing. 2 months that hit me like a brick. Glenn had updated the will recently. Very recently before the heart attack after his last family retreat. I remembered Karina going on that trip alone. You'd be bored anyway, she told me, tossing sunscreen in her suitcase. At the time, I believed her. Now, I wasn't so sure. The lawyer began listing assets. Properties in Rhode Island, an apartment in Paris, 3 vehicles worth more than my childhood home, art pieces by names I couldn't pronounce. Each line of the document felt like someone else's fantasy life. Then came the distribution to my daughter, Karina Elise Derby. She tilted her head slightly, like a queen awaiting her crown. I leave the sum of $1 million to be managed by the family trust under the oversight of Mr. Bradley Vaughn. Karina blinked. Just once. The lawyer didn't flinch. She cleared her throat and asked, "Did you mean 100 million?" The room went silent. The kind of silence that thickens the air. The lawyer adjusted his glasses. No, 1 million. The remainder of Mr. Darby's estate will be transferred to another beneficiary as outlined in this letter. Then he opened a sealed envelope hand addressed. He pulled out a single-page letter and began to read. Glenn's voice echoing from the paper. "If you're hearing this, Karina, I'm likely gone. I've watched you change. Not over years, but in weeks. You stopped visiting unless there was a camera involved. You brought that man, the one you thought I didn't notice, into my home and left behind my back. I am not a fool. You loved your inheritance more than your father. And so my money will not be your reward." Karina's mouth opened slightly. No sound came out, not even a gasp. The lawyer continued, his voice flat. "To the man who married my daughter despite knowing she would one day despise him. To the man who tolerated my cruelty with dignity and who stayed even when he should have left. Wendell Thomas Carr. I leave the remainder of my estate." I swear time broke in that moment. I felt my lungs forget how to breathe. Karina looked at me like I had grown antlers. The man next to her stood up as if the chair had suddenly become dangerous. I didn't know what to say. I didn't want this. I just wanted my marriage. I wanted my cat. I wanted my Sunday mornings back. But none of that mattered because I was now the legal heir to a $250 million empire. And the woman who left me was staring at the floor like it had betrayed her, too. I left the room before they finished the paperwork. I needed air. I needed distance. I needed to scream and laugh and vomit all at once. She ran after me. I heard her heels scrape the marble tiles faster than I'd seen her move in years. "Wendell!" She called out, but I kept walking down the driveway, past the fountain, through the gates. Because for the first time in my life, I wasn't the one being left behind. I walked for over an hour that day. Not because I didn't have a ride, not because I was trying to be dramatic, but because if I didn't keep moving, I felt like I might explode. The air felt heavier. Even the trees lining that state road looked like they were leaning in, whispering things behind my back. I didn't want the money. I wanted a time machine. I wanted to go back 6 months and shake myself until I noticed all the signs I had ignored. I wanted to go back before Karina started disappearing into her phone, before she started wearing new perfume and saying things like, "You wouldn't understand the world I come from." When I finally made it back to my cousin's place, I sat on the edge of the pull-out couch, still wearing the same wrinkled shirt from the reading, staring at a plastic plant in the corner. My cousin's kid was watching some cartoon where animals flew planes. I could barely hear it. All I could hear was Glenn's voice in my head. That part of the will to the man who stayed even when he should have left. I hadn't even known he'd seen me, the real me. And now he was gone. I didn't sleep that night either. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was fear. I wasn't built for this. I didn't know what to do with money that had more zeros than I'd ever seen. My whole life had been coupons, bulk ramen, and budgeting gas to make it through the week. I didn't even know how to talk to lawyers. What do you do with that kind of wealth when just last week you couldn't afford the fancy peanut butter? But Karina knew. She knew exactly what to do. The very next morning, She was waiting in front of the depot where I worked. Yes, I still showed up. What else was I going to do? She was leaning against the hood of her BMW like she hadn't shattered my heart and walked out on me. Like nothing had happened. And the look in her eyes, it wasn't sorrow. It wasn't even desperation. It was hunger. Strategic, polished hunger. "We need to talk," she said, pushing her sunglasses up into her hair like she was in some courtroom drama. "No, we really don't," I replied, brushing past her. But she followed me right into the building, right past my supervisor. She cornered me near the break room. Standing so close, I could smell the same vanilla lotion she used when we were still sharing a bed. For a moment, I almost forgot everything. I almost remembered what it felt like to wake up next to her and think I'd want something. And then she said it, "You don't deserve this, Wendell." No apology, no guilt, just that. I stared at her, honestly, stunned she even had the nerve. She blinked like I was the unreasonable one. "You think this is your money?" she continued, lowering her voice. This wasn't supposed to happen. He was punishing me. That's all. He always knew how to twist things. "You're just a symbol, Wendell. This isn't about you." I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because I didn't know how else to stop my hands from shaking. "A symbol?" I asked. "So I'm not even a real person to you?" She crossed her arms. "You were a mistake that lasted too long." That line, I still hear it in my bones. A mistake that lasted too long. Before I could say anything, before I could even process how deeply that cut, she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick folder. Legal papers, highlighted sections, post-it notes sticking out the side like angry yellow teeth. "This is a revised proposal," she said, "for division of estate assets. You don't need all of it. You don't know what to do with it. You'll lose it. Let's be realistic. You'll get eaten alive." Is that a threat? It's an offer, Wendell. A chance for you to walk away with dignity before you embarrass both of us. She smiled then. The same smile she used to give store clerks when she wanted them to waive the return policy. I didn't take the folder. I couldn't. My hands were clenched into fists at my sides. Not from anger. I wasn't raised to hit or shout, but from shame. Because a part of me believed her. A part of me thought, she's right. I don't belong in that world. But another part, a quieter, shakier voice inside me said, maybe I do. Maybe Glenn saw something in me that Karina never did. Maybe staying even when it made me feel invisible meant something more than just weakness. She turned to leave, heels clicking with confidence, folder still in hand. "You'll call me," she said over her shoulder. "You always do, but this time I didn't because this time I had something I never had before. Leverage. And Karina, she wasn't done playing games, but neither was I. By the end of that week, everything about my life felt fake. I was still clocking in at the depot, still eating off-brand cereal in a borrowed basement and still getting texts from Karina, pretending like she was doing me a favor. She didn't beg. Karina never begged. She negotiated. Cold, calculated language. Let's be smart about this. We can avoid dragging it out. Think of the media. The media. As if the world gave a damn about a guy who once fixed his neighbor's dryer in exchange for leftover barbecue. But someone must have been watching because by Friday I got a call from one of Glenn's estate attorneys. Not the guy from the will reading, but a younger voice, tense and uneasy. He asked if I could come in to review supplemental documents. I said I didn't understand. He said it concerns the structure of the inheritance. You'll want to read this yourself. The office was in a glass building downtown. The kind of place I used to pass on my way to dollar lunch specials, always assuming I didn't belong inside. The receptionist didn't even look up. I sat on a leather couch that cost more than my first car, sweating through my shirt and trying not to touch anything. When I got into the conference room, they handed me a sealed folder and stepped out. giving me privacy. I opened it slowly. My name was on the first page in bold. I skimmed the lines, barely processing most of the legal jargon, until I reached the section labeled addendum, conditions of inheritance. It turns out Glenn wasn't just bitter. He was brilliantly cruel in the most precise theatrical way. His money didn't just come to me. It came with instructions. A chunk of the estate, nearly 40%, was placed in a time-locked trust under my name. But here's the twist. That portion wouldn't activate unless I remained divorced from Karina for at least 18 consecutive months. If I re-entered a relationship with her, married or not, I'd forfeit that entire portion too. Get this? A wildlife sanctuary for abandoned dogs. I read the paragraph 3 times, each time with a louder gasp. Glenn had literally designed a clause that punished me if I ever took her back. It wasn't just money. It was a trap. A loyalty test from beyond the grave. And he'd included a note handwritten, scanned, attached to the final page. Wendell, if you're tempted to return to the cage, remember you were never the pet. She only knew how to feed you. Don't let her leash you again, GD. It was both infuriating and oddly poetic. The man who once mocked me for folding his daughter's laundry now posthumously declared me worthy of freedom and fortune. All I had to do was stay away from her. I should have felt grateful, relieved even. But instead, I felt sick because Karina had come back. She was trying to reel me in again. And now it wasn't just about betrayal or heartbreak. It was about manipulation, strategy, control. She hadn't changed. She was just cornered. That night I didn't answer her call. She left a voicemail. I didn't play it. The next morning, I found her sitting in front of my cousin's house. Again, same car, same coat, but this time, no folder. Just her with red eyes and messy hair looking almost human. I just want to talk, she said. You always do. She looked down at her hands, then back up. You've read the documents, haven't you? I didn't reply. Her jaw tightened. It's humiliating, Wendell. What he did to me. To us. That clause is a joke. It's disgusting. He's laughing at us from the grave. You sure he's not just laughing at you? I said without meaning to. It came out colder than I expected. She blinked. The first crack in the armor. I didn't mean to hurt you, she whispered. But I laughed sharp, tired. Didn't mean to. Karina, you had the divorce filed before his ashes cooled. I was just supposed to roll over while you collected the money and the guy in the blue loafers. She looked like she wanted to cry, but nothing came. And I suddenly realized something terrifying she couldn't. Not because she was too proud, but because the emotion just wasn't there. And maybe it never had been. Before she left, she tried one last thing. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a photograph. It was old from our early days. A picnic by the lake, plastic wine glasses, her laying on my chest. She held it between 2 fingers like it meant something. I keep this with me, she said. You weren't just a stepping stone, Wendell. But I didn't take the photo. I left it on the porch after she drove away. That night, I looked up the sanctuary named in the class. It had over 300 rescued dogs. One of them was named Captain Pickles. If I took her back, Captain Pickles got my money. I never wanted a symbol of my self-worth to be a pug with a lazy eye. But somehow in that moment, I understood everything. Karina wasn't just trying to win me back. She was trying to defuse the bomb her father had planted, but the clock was already ticking. And I wasn't going to lose this time. The photo stayed on the porch for 2 days. It rained the first night, just a soft drizzle, enough to warp the edges and blur my jawline. I thought my cousin's kid had brought it inside. But when I stepped out for work that Monday morning, there it was, still clinging to the wood. Its corners curling like it had aged 20 years overnight. I picked it up not because I wanted it, but because I needed the reminder not of what we had, but of what she gave up. You'd think this was where things cooled down, right? Where Karina cut her losses, disappeared into some mansion with marble floors, and left me to ride off into my accidental fortune. But you'd be wrong. Karina was never the type to lose quietly, especially not to someone like me. 3 days later, I got an envelope in the mail. No stamp, just left in the box. My name printed in red ink on the front. Bold, dramatic, theatrical, like someone trying too hard to seem mysterious. Inside a single sheet of paper, no letterhead, no explanation, just 2 sentences. There are things you don't know, Wendell. You should be careful who you trust with Glenn's secrets. No signature. At first, I thought it was a prank. Then I thought maybe it was Karina playing some mind game, trying to shake my grip loose on the inheritance. But the more I stared at it, the more I realized it wasn't her tone. Karina didn't warn, she demanded. That night, I sat up going through every folder, email, document the lawyer had given me. I hadn't touched most of it. Honestly, I was still overwhelmed by the sheer volume of financial jargon. But now I dug in looking for something, anything that would explain the message, and I found it. Not on official letterhead, not buried in legal language. It was tucked in the back of a sealed envelope labeled miscellaneous correspondence. Inside were a handful of printed emails from Glenn's private server. Most were nothing. Notes to his assistant, instructions for the staff. But one thread caught my attention. The subject line read, Ray Karina's request. Urgency noted. I opened it. It was from someone named A. Whitley. The email was short, almost sterile. We've reviewed the request. Document destruction would require written sign-off from all trustees per the original agreement. At this time, only one signature has been received. We will not proceed without the second. I didn't understand at first document destruction trustees, but the timestamp was just 2 weeks. Before Glenn's death, I flipped to the earlier message in the chain, and that's when the breath caught in my throat. Karina had requested the removal, no destruction, of a file called a Dead MC. Disqualification clause. It didn't take a law degree to guess what that meant. I printed the emails and called Glenn's attorney the next morning. When I told him what I found, there was a pause. Not long, just long enough to tell me he hadn't expected me to find it, Mr. Carr, he said carefully. Those documents were reviewed after Mr. Darby's passing. The clause was deemed valid. As you know, no alterations to the will were executed after his final notarized revision. So she tried to get the clause removed, I said, almost to myself. She made contact, yes, but legally, nothing changed. I hung up and sat there staring at the wall for a long time. Karina hadn't just left me. She'd known about the class. She'd known what her father had done, and she tried to erase it before he died. That photo she dropped off, the visit to my job, the sudden soft voice, the nostalgia, the fake tears. It wasn't just manipulation, it was damage control. That night, I got another voicemail from her. She didn't know I'd found the emails yet, but her voice was tighter now. Controlled, but thinner. She was losing ground, and she knew it. Wendell, please. I know this has been ugly, but you and I both know he did this to hurt me. You're just a placeholder. I'm the one who had to live under his rules my whole life. I deserve a piece of it. You can't actually want to punish me like this. I listened to it twice. Then I saved it. Not because I needed proof. I just wanted to remember exactly who she was when she thought no one was listening. But what Karina didn't realize, and what Glenn probably hoped I'd figure out, is that there were more than just emails. There were videos, security footage, archive locks, time-stamped visits to his estate. And one file dated 3 days before he died, titled Library July 10th. I didn't even know the estate had a library. But apparently that's where the final twist was waiting. And Karina, she had no idea I was about to find it. If you've ever been in a room that was never meant to feel warm, you'll understand what it felt like walking into Glenn Darby's private library. It took nearly a week of calls, paperwork, and waiting for clearance from the estate manager before they finally let me onto the property. Again, I have expected someone to stop me at the gate and say they'd changed their mind, that I'd been mistaken, that the money wasn't mine after all, that I'd go back to being invisible. But the guards recognized me now, not as Karina's ex, not as the broken guy who fixed radiators. No, now I was MR, Carr, sole beneficiary of the Derby fortune. And apparently even the marble lions by the front door stood a little straighter when you walked in with that title. The library was located on the second floor of the West Wing, a place I'd never been allowed when Karina and I used to visit. She told me it was off limits, something about private archives and family history I wouldn't understand. Now I understood everything. It wasn't about books. It was about control. Because tucked between leather-bound first editions and a globe that probably hadn't spun in 50 years was a drawer behind a false panel. I didn't find it on my own. One of the estate staff, an older man named Horace, guided me there. He didn't say much, just handed me a brass key and said he wanted you to see it. Inside the drawer was a single flash drive in a velvet-lined box labeled in Glenn's handwriting. Library, July 10th, final record. It felt heavier than it should have, like it wasn't plastic and metal, but loaded with everything I'd been too blind to see for the past few years. I watched it alone in the estate study with the curtains pulled and the doors locked. The file was under 5 minutes long. No music, no effects. Just raw footage from a fixed-angle security camera position above the fireplace in the library. It showed Karina not crying, not mourning, not even alone. She was pacing, agitated, her phone clutched in one hand, the other gesturing wildly. She wasn't talking to Glenn. He was seated behind the desk, motionless, watching. His expression wasn't sad. It was exhausted. I leaned in. "You have no right to do this." Karina snapped. "You want to die with a smile on your face knowing you've taken everything from me?" Glenn didn't respond. "You hate me so much you'd rather give your empire to a man who unclogged your toilet." Still no answer. She stepped closer, voice rising. "He's weak, Dad. He doesn't belong in this world. He's not even one of us. He barely knows how to dress himself. This is humiliating." Glenn finally moved. Not much. Just leaned forward. "You made your choice," he said, voice cold. "You left him before I was even gone. So what?" She hissed. "You were already halfway in the grave." He held up a hand, cutting her off. "And yet I lived long enough to rewrite the will." She froze. Her face, normally composed, twisted in something close to panic. He went on slower now. "You thought you could outsmart me. Have your freedom. Keep the fortune. Erase the consequences." "But Karina, there are consequences." "You always thought love was leverage." "But Wendell, he never asked me for anything, never took a dime, never insulted me, even when I tried to push him away." Karina backed up a step. Her expression was unreadable now, fury tangled with confusion. "This isn't about love," she said finally. "This is about punishment." "No," Glenn said. "It's about protection. I'm protecting my legacy from you." And that was it. The video ended. I sat there for a long time. The screen black, my own face faintly reflected in the glare. It wasn't satisfying. It wasn't some cinematic victory where the villain is exposed and justice rains down. No, it hurt. It all hurt because deep down I'd still hope she might care. That some piece of her, even a tiny one, had loved me once. But the way she spoke about me, like I was an embarrassing accident. She hadn't lost me. She had discarded me. And now the only thing she wanted was the thing I accidentally inherited. The thing her father left me, not out of spite, but out of recognition. But here's the problem Karina never saw coming. Something I finally understood in that dark, cold room. She hadn't just lost the money. She'd lost the one person who might have defended her. Because there was something else in the file folders I hadn't noticed before. Tucked behind the legal documents, behind the emails and property deeds. A medical report, a sealed envelope marked private to be read after death, and inside a final instruction from Glenn. One that didn't just disqualify Karina from the inheritance. It hinted that she may have done more than just manipulate and lie. It hinted she might have helped speed things up. I don't know how long I sat there holding that envelope. I didn't open it right away. My fingers just trembled around the edges like the damn thing might bite me if I looked inside. I've never been good with mysteries. I'm the kind of guy who Googles spoilers halfway through a movie just to ease the tension. But this wasn't a plot twist I've been waiting for. This was real and it had Glenn's initials on the seal. It wasn't long or dramatic, not like the video, just a single page note, handwritten in careful block letters. Glenn's penmanship looked sharp, almost mechanical, like every word had been measured twice and carved in with a blade. If this reaches you, Wendell, I am dead and you've chosen not to give in to Karina. Good. You always had more spine than she gave you credit for. I'm not writing this as a confession. I'm writing it because I believe deep down I won't die by nature's hand alone. I know my daughter. I know what she's capable of when she's desperate. That one line, it felt like ace in my veins. I have no proof, just instinct. I was healthy before the retreat. MY doctors confirmed it. But after the weekend she visited, something changed. Chest pains, dizzy spells. She offered me a new tea she said was part of a cleanse. I never drank it again after I threw up the first night. Still, I told no one. What kind of father suspects his own daughter of trying to finish the inheritance early? But Wendell, if you're reading this, and I didn't go peacefully, promise me one thing. Don't let her walk away untouched. I set the paper down and stared at the grain in the desk for a long time. This wasn't an accusation. Not legally, not officially, just a suspicion. A whisper from a man who'd spent a lifetime calculating people. I wanted to tell myself it was paranoia that Glenn, for all his brilliance, had let grief distort his judgment, but my gut said otherwise. The memory of Karina in that video hissing about taking everything, her obsession with the claws, the desperation in her eyes, every time she showed up, pretending to be remorseful. It all started to form a pattern. And that's when I remembered the security locks. Horace had shown me the server terminal briefly, just a footnote in the tour. But those logs, they tracked who entered what rooms and when. I rushed back downstairs and asked him if I could access them again. He hesitated, but when I showed him the letter, his expression hardened and he simply nodded. We pulled up the archive for the weekend, Glenn mentioned. Karina had entered the kitchen 6 times, the guest room twice, the library once, and Glenn's private quarters, 7 entries, all between midnight and 4 a.m. 7. When I asked how often guests typically had access to that space, Horace said flatly, never. Unless invited. And that was the thing. I knew Glenn. He didn't invite Karina into that room at midnight. Not 7 times. Still, it wasn't proof. Not enough for police, not enough for lawsuits. But it was enough for me. Enough to understand that everything she'd done since the funeral wasn't about loss or grief. It was fear. Not of losing money, but of me discovering that she might have played a part in how fast the money arrived. It was fear wearing perfume and lipstick and tight smiles. So I made a choice. I called her. She picked up on the first ring, breathless, like she'd been staring at the phone for hours. Wendell, I found the footage. I said, the one from the library and the letter. There was silence. I let it sit. Then softly, she said, you're not supposed to have that. No, I said, I'm not. Just like you weren't supposed to be in his room 7 times after midnight. She exhaled sharply. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying, and so do you. Another pause. Then carefully with that same twisted control she always used when she was cornered. She asked, "What do you want?" It was the first time she didn't pretend to be innocent. And in that moment, I realized something. Karina didn't believe in guilt, her shame, her family. She believed in leverage. So I gave her none. Nothing. I said, "I want nothing from you, and I'm going to give you nothing back. No money, no silence, no protection. You're going to spend the next year wondering if I'll go to the police. You'll keep your hair perfect and your smiles polished, but you'll always flinch when a doorbell rings." Her voice broke then. For real, Wendell. But I hung up. I'd never felt stronger in my entire life. And I wasn't done because Glenn didn't just give me an inheritance. He gave me a sword. I never planned to become a millionaire. I never imagined I'd be standing in a courtroom 6 months after my wife left me, listening to lawyers argue about tea bags, security logs, and inheritance clauses. I certainly never thought I'd be the one standing still while Karina, always so composed, so perfect, finally fell apart in front of a judge, a jury, and a gallery of silent onlookers. But life, as Glenn would say, has an exquisite taste for irony. I didn't go to the police right away after that call. I took my time, did what Karina never expected me to do. I moved carefully. I let her think I was bluffing. I let her panic quietly in her glass condo with her wine and her spreadsheets. And while she watched the phone like a grenade with a twitchy pin, I started building a case. I hired Glenn's own private investigator, a man who'd worked for the Darby family for years. Turns out he already had suspicions about Karina. He compiled notes, dates, pharmacy receipts, financial transfers. There was a trail, faint but undeniable, showing that Karina had purchased certain compounds from a boutique wellness shop, known for cleansing powders, the same ones Glenn had consumed and then suddenly stopped. Once we turned it over to the estate attorneys, the machine came to life quietly, quickly. Karina was served with formal accusations of attempted tampering with a trust, destruction of protected legal documents, and will interference. It didn't go to criminal court. We weren't trying to convict her, but it did go to civil court. And in that courtroom, the full weight of Glenn Darby's empire crushed whatever hope Karina had left. The clause held. She walked in thinking she could challenge it. She walked out with nothing, not a dime. The judge honored the structure of the trust, the addendum, the footage, and even Glenn's handwritten statement. Karina's remaining stake was frozen, then legally redirected, not to me, but to a series of charities Glenn had named as alternates in case of moral compromise. Within the family, she tried to fight it. She appealed twice, but each time the court sided with the evidence. With the old man's voice from the grave, with the broken husband who had stayed quiet long enough. And me, I didn't run out and buy a yacht. I didn't move to Paris or hire a chef. I moved into a modest place near a lake upstate, adopted to senior rescue dogs from Captain Pickle's sanctuary, and started volunteering there once a week. Funny how one clause written out of spite turned into the only peaceful place I've ever known. I've learned things I never knew I needed to learn. How to file estate taxes. How to trust again slowly. How to sleep without checking my phone at 2 a.m. Wondering if she's texting someone else. People ask me if I'm angry, if I still miss her. And the truth is, I don't know. I don't miss the lies. I don't miss the weight of her expectations. But sometimes I miss who I thought she was. That version of Karina I used to imagine still loved me somewhere beneath all the ambition and contempt. But missing a ghost isn't the same as wanting it back. Not long ago, I got a letter handwritten, messy, and then signed. No return address. Just one sentence inside. You ruined everything. I didn't keep it. I let the dogs chew it up because she's wrong. I didn't ruin everything. I saved what was left of me, and that was worth far more than $250 million.